Fleet Commander Zix Rill adjusted his ceremonial plumage with mounting frustration as he stared at the tactical hologram displaying the siege of Kepler 442b. The crystalline structures that housed 3 million Avarian civilians were under constant bombardment from the hegemony's orbital platforms, and his fleet's elegant energy shields were failing. "Status report," he commanded, his melodic voice carrying the strain of 6 days without rest. "The hegemony has established a full blockade, Commander," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kethnari. "Their superior numbers are wearing down our defensive formations. At current attrition rates, we have perhaps 18 standard hours before complete shield collapse." Zix Rill's feathers ruffled in agitation. The hegemony had always been aggressive, but this unprovoked assault on a peaceful colony world violated every treaty in the Galactic Compact. Worse, their hit-and-run tactics were perfectly suited to counter Avarian military doctrine, which emphasized honor formation flying and elegant maneuvers that looked beautiful but required time to execute. "Any response to our request for reinforcements?" he asked, though he knew the Confederation's closest fleet was weeks away. "Actually, yes, sir," Kethnari replied, his tone puzzled. "We've received confirmation from an unknown species called humans from the Sol system. They say they're inbound with a reinforcement unit." "Humans?" Zix Rill had never heard the designation. "What's their estimated strength?" They didn't specify numbers, but they mentioned something about Marines and asked for orbital drop coordinates. Before Zix Rill could respond, space twisted near the edge of the system as ships dropped out of hyperspace. But these weren't the graceful vessels he expected from a Confederation member species. The human ships were ugly, functional things that looked like they'd been built in a shipyard, that had never heard of aesthetics, angular hulls covered in armor plating, and weapon systems that seemed designed by someone who understood that space combat was about killing the enemy efficiently, not looking good while doing it. "Avarian Command, this is Colonel Hayes of the 3rd Terran Marine Expeditionary Unit," came a transmission in heavily accented but serviceable galactic standard. "We're here to assist with your hegemony problem. Request permission to commence combat operations." "Colonel Hayes," Zix Rill replied carefully, "we appreciate your assistance, but this is a complex tactical situation requiring careful coordination. Perhaps you could integrate your forces with our defensive formation." "Negative, Commander," Hayes interrupted. "We've analyzed the situation. The hegemony has you locked in a defensive posture, bleeding you dry. That's not how we handle sieges. We're going to break their blockade and take out those orbital platforms." Zix Rill felt his blood chill. "Colonel, that's suicide. The hegemony has 47 capital ships and established defensive positions. You appear to have brought only 12 vessels." "That's all we need," came the reply, with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. "Avarian Command, you might want to pull your ships back. This is about to get messy." What happened next violated everything Zix Rill thought he knew about space warfare. The human ships didn't form elegant battle lines or attempt to match the hegemony formation for formation. Instead, they scattered like a pack of predators, each vessel moving independently while somehow coordinating perfectly. They used the asteroid field that the Avarians had been carefully avoiding, slipping between rocks and debris like they were flying through empty space. The first hegemony ship to die never saw it coming. One moment it was maintaining position in the blockade line, the next it was venting atmosphere as human kinetic weapons punched through its shields like they weren't even there. "Impossible," Lieutenant Kethnari whispered. "Their weapons shouldn't be able to penetrate military-grade shields." But the humans weren't using energy weapons that could be dispersed or absorbed. They were firing solid projectiles, massive chunks of dense metal, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. When kinetic energy met hegemony shields, physics won. The hegemony fleet tried to respond, but the humans refused to fight fair. They used the planet's gravity well to slingshot around the dark side, emerging at impossible angles. They coordinated with their orbital bombardment platforms to create crossfires that trapped hegemony ships between multiple threat vectors. When the enemy tried to fall back to a defensive posture, the humans simply ignored their formations and attacked their supply ships. Like hunters, Kethnari finished. They're not trying to defeat the hegemony fleet. They're trying to kill it. Like hunters, Kethnari finished. They're not trying to defeat the hegemony fleet. They're trying to kill it. Within 3 hours, what had been a carefully planned hegemony siege had become a rout. The surviving enemy ships fled the system, leaving behind the wreckage of nearly 30 vessels and all 6 orbital bombardment platforms. Colonel Hayes' face appeared on the main communications screen, a bipedal species with forward-facing eyes that marked them as natural predators. His uniform was stained with what looked suspiciously like blood, and there was a satisfaction in his expression that made Zix-Real's feathers stand on end. Avarian Command, this is Colonel Hayes. Hegemony forces have been neutralized. Your colony is secure. Colonel, Zix-Real began, still trying to process what he'd witnessed, your tactics. They're unlike anything in our military databases. How did you know they would work? Hayes smiled, revealing teeth that were clearly designed for tearing flesh. Commander, where we come from, you don't survive by fighting fair. You survive by fighting to win. The hegemony made the mistake of thinking this was some kind of genteel space opera. We showed them it was a war. But the casualties, your losses, must have been severe. 2 injured, both non-critical, Hayes replied casually. Marine Corps doesn't take casualties if we can help it. We give them. As the human fleet began establishing patrol routes around the planet, Zix-Real realized that his people had just learned something fundamental about the galaxy. Somewhere out there was a species that had evolved beyond the need for honor in combat, beyond the luxury of fighting with style and grace. They had asked for reinforcements and received 12 ships, with perhaps 1,000 beings aboard. What they had gotten was a force that fought like the galaxy itself was trying to kill them because, as he was beginning to understand, it probably had been.